Start streaming, start recording, start streaming. Let's see if anybody could see us. We are live with Ep02 of Devs Deving. Let's see. I'm just going to double check that this live. I'm going to share about it in chat that we are live. Just to Senko Discord. Okay. And Telegram too. Okay. All right. Eric, how's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Yeah.
We
Uh,
we've been making some progress this over the past couple weeks. Been focused on a couple things. One is so basically, completed kind of an initial version of the game, what we're calling the game design agent, which is the user's going to have this initial conversation of, I want to make this type of game. And so we have an agent that its job is to basically capture all the details about the game the user wants to make, have that conversation back and forth, and then produce kind of a final natural language specification of the game. And then that will feed the other agents, right? So that'll feed our Gen AI agents that would be responsible for creating, graphical assets and things like that, and it will feed our game maker agent that will actually generate the game def from which we can then generate the game code. Um, so we've got an initial version of that. And I've been working on getting that integrated into Discord, into our Discord, and that's really close. By the end of the day, that'll be working. I've just got a little bug. Um, so yeah, so users will be able
yeah.
to go into our Discord and try out try out the game agent. And So, one of the things that realized pretty quickly was that when we're trying to produce these game defs, there's a lot of information in the spec already. I mean, there's not too much information, because it's still a pretty basic game def for creating pretty basic games. But at this
Hmm.
level, already the specification for the game definition language and the schemas um, are exceed a 200K context window for Claude,
Mm.
and 200K is currently the largest context window available generally to the public. um, Google has a 1.5 million context window that they have had some success with. That's available in limited release to select developers, but 200K is even if you were to use ChatGPT for Omni or what have you. I think actually its limits lower. I think it's like 150K.
Mm.
So AIs still have fairly small context windows, at least in terms of the amount of data that we're trying to send them. And I'm somewhat skeptical of an LLM, getting a context window of 1.5 million
Yeah.
and being able to retain all of the details of that in order to produce something. So that has caused us to have to think about how do we feed information to an AI in order to get it to generate these game defs. And You know, a lot of times when people are doing things with models, they use, uh, you know, retrieval augmented generation (RAG), um, or there's other approaches. And what they're doing is they're basically saying, okay, the user has asked a question, and the AI needs to answer that question, and so some code goes off and searches a vector database, finds documentation relative to that question, and then feeds that into the context window.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so by narrowing down kind of the information you need, you can shove enough information in the context window that AI can answer the question. That doesn't really work for us because the AI needs to know everything about the specification in order to produce it. It needs to know, like, what are all of the actions that
Mm-hmm.
are available? What are all the components that are available in the game def? What are the schemas for these things? What parameters do they need? And so
Mm-hmm.
we really don't have an opportunity. And like I said, right now we have a fairly minimal set of information that we need. It's going to grow as we expand. Um, and so we really don't have the ability to narrow down that set anymore. So what can we do? And so the strategy that we're employing is we're going to essentially um, chunk it up and have multiple agents, and each agent will be responsible for just doing a piece of that. Um,
Interesting. Okay,
and
yeah.
so right now, uh, I have an actions agent, and so the actions agent's job is to look at the game definition, or the natural language specification, and we feed it. Here's the list of all the actions that are available. Here is the specification that the game design agent produced. Um, and what we ask it to do is say, simply identify all of the actions that are going to be required in order to produce this game. Um,
Mm.
you know, and but not even like figure out like what the parameters are for them, right? Just figure out what actions are going to be needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then because once I start saying what parameters are needed, now I've got to start feeding it all these schemas, and I'll blow up the context window. So this is just tell me what actions are required, and then we would feed that to another agent. And now when we feed that to the other agent, we'd say, okay, you know, the actions identification agent has identified these actions. Here are the schemas for these actions. Here is the specification for the game that we're trying to create. Now go figure out, you know, what parameters need to exist on those actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And add those. And then we would have another agent, right? And maybe that agent be responsible for components, or components might be too broad. Maybe we'll have an agent that's just responsible for inventories. And inventories in our game def are like just buckets, essentially. You know, so like for example, if you have cards in a deck, those are in a deck inventory. But then when you play the cards to the table, they're in a table inventory.
Mm-hmm.
And so inventories are just a way that we can have sort of cards in, you know, or any game pieces in different states. And we can move them around, and we can exchange them between players, and we can exchange them between players in a central bank. But we can even do things like, for example, in our matching game, when the user flips over cards, we put them into a flipped card inventory, and then we can have a match mechanic that just runs and says, okay, look at everything in the flipped card inventory and identify any that match, right? And any that
Yeah.
match, put them into a match inventory. And then I can have a scoring mechanic say, okay, you know, score a certain number of points, or an action saying, take all the cards that are in the matched inventory and put them now in the player's inventory. So long story short, the point is that by breaking this up and attacking this from, you know, different directions and different angles, we can hopefully stay within the size of the context window and have each of these agents produce a piece of the overall game definition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, the other thing we run into is the output window. So if we get a very, very big game definition, then we couldn't fit it into the output window. And
Uh-huh.
so we may run into situations. We're already going to expecting that, like we're going to build a deck in a separate, like in its own thing, right? And then we'll like
Hmm.
write the deck to a file and we'll include it in the main file. But we may even run into situations where we have to say, okay, we're going to have an agent that's responsible for just outputting a portion of the game def, and then we'll assemble the final game def, using just regular plain old code with the input from all these agents. Um, so it's a pretty big, interesting challenge of figuring out how to take these small context windows and feed it all the information it needs, let it do something,
Hmm.
perhaps um, take all those outputs and then assemble those and put those together.
Is the output the same limitation as the input,
No,
or?
well, it's actually smaller.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so
Okay.
so the models have like a 200K input window. I'm trying to remember the output window size. I think is like 4 or 5,000 or something like that.
So it
Um,
just is kind of going into like a divide and conquer. The more we can split this up into smaller windows and split it up so that
yeah,
whenever something needs to be changed, it's not the whole thing or it's just a certain component. Uh,
yeah. I mean, it literally just becomes like the mechanics of how you have to do it when you're working with models and this kind of information. Um, when people say, well, how do AI coding assistants work, right? And if you
mhm,
think about it, the AI coding assistant, um, it's unlikely that you have a single source file that's 200K. You take
mhm,
Copilot, and its context window is some of the history. And I think what they do is they take everything that it can see in the window or everything you have selected and say, okay, that is the primary part of the context window. And then whatever is left in the context window, it just fills with the chat history. Um,
mhm,
and then Copilot has a workspace command where you can actually say like, hey, uh, look at my workspace and infer some things based on my workspace. And in that situation, I think it's using probably like a RAG agent where it's going off and it's saying, okay, here's all the things in your workspace that seem to be relevant. It's still not providing full, files or documents. It's still basically kind of chunking that up and trying to identify pieces of that and feeding that in the context window. Um, but you'll find that, the more stuff you fit into the context window in terms of like the current code and the information from the workspace, the less history it's going to remember,
mhm,
in terms of the chat history. Um, One of the nice things that we've been able to do is that we don't really care that much about the history, right? Because what we're doing is we're basically um, saying, okay, at least from a point of view, the design agent, we're saying here is the user's design, and then the agent comes up with a game specification, um, and and then it comes up with a list of questions, and then we take the user's response to that as feedback, but we instruct the game design agent to always produce a complete specification for the game. So
mhm,
even if the user asks a question, answer the question in the context of, you know, a complete game specification. Um, it in practice feels a little less conversational because you don't have that thing of like, hey, I'm asking a question and I'm riffing with the AI and back and forth and we're talking and then we're converging on something. We can add that kind of capability in later. But the nice
mhm,
aspect of that is like we don't really care about the history. We don't care what happened. We don't need the whole chat history to see how this thing has evolved because the game design agent is always putting out the current state plus the user's feedback, right? So it's
mhm,
always building on that. If we were to run it, one issue we could run into is a situation where A user could say, you know what, go back to what you did before. Like
Yeah.
go back and like I don't like this latest iteration. Go back to a previous iteration. And as it stands right now, it would say, I don't know what you're talking about. Like I don't have any context. But we can address that through some retrieval techniques. So like if the AI feels that it needs to recover a previous, something in history, then we can give it a tool where it can say, "Hey, give me the history," and then it can search the history and find what it's looking for, and then use that as input.
Yeah. So I am gonna kind of like go and do an overview, just for the new people that joined us, and I see Mike is asking this question.
Sure.
Um, we kind of just jumped right into it because I was excited to hear some of these updates myself. And this this is supposed to sort of be like an open-ended chat between us anyway, to catch up and have it be open for the community to come in and answer questions or ask questions and be part of it. But so Chaincraft, just to go over it, is a game platform that we're working on. Eric's the dev. Matt can't be here today. My name's Ryan, or Trigadytron, or Bucho, however you know me, mostly in the Senko community. We are building this concept of AI agents that help you create and monetize game components. We want you to be able to, as a game developer, or even as a casual gamer, somebody who wants to make games, be able to fail quickly when it comes to creating games, because right now it can be very costly for game creation or game devs to build a game, and they have to get really far and have a lot of time and money invested into it sometimes to get to a point where they find out that something doesn't work. And we have this idea of utilizing separate game agents that, just like Eric was talking about, that can kind of focus on different aspects of building components of a game, and in the long run, you'd be able to take those components and monetize them by having them live on the blockchain. You can earn royalties, and you can kind of own what you've built and designed, with this idea of there being a really cool, maybe sandbox way of like coming up with game mechanics that have never even been thought of. And uh, right now, we are starting bare bones, or like as like low level as possible, to try to think of like a place to start so that this project can build out actually in an open source way, mind you. We're starting with a match game, or like card based game, something where there's like not much of a 3D or 2D platformer element, something that's like what's a simple game, and card games seem to be something to start with, and even simpler than just card games in general. Matchmaking games is what we're starting with, just because it's simple. You have these cards, X amount of cards in a grid, and you flip them over and you try to match them. Like, it's just a simple place to start, that can have steps to get into maybe even like a collectible card game or something like that down the line. And our recent updates are, oh, this light is annoying me. It's like flickering on and off. Recent updates are, we've thought about how to do this, and we like the idea of having it be a bot in Discord, where you can actually, as a community, can start to interact and help us build out this agent. Um, and so, honestly, even Eric has just been working so hard, and we just got a moderator, just launched our Discord. But soon enough, we're going to have our first iteration of like how to interact with this AI agent. And Eric, I mean, put in any info there that, or any gaps that maybe I didn't quite touch on. Um, but that's sort of where we're at right now, and I'm pretty excited about launching the Discord, and just even as simple as this thing could be on a Discord bot. Like, it'd be kind of cool to get to that point where we can even just start tinkering with chatting with the Discord bot. And I saw you
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of were.
yeah, it's gonna be invaluable because I mean, really, like when you're developing an AI system, it's not like traditional software development where, you start with a set of requirements, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm going to build this system. And then you're obviously going to, iterate on that based on stakeholder feedback and things like that. Building AI systems is really more almost like a science project, where you kind of start with a hypothesis and then you say, okay, um, what are some experiments that I can do to prove that this works? Because it's not deterministic. You don't exactly know what it's going to do or why it's going to do it. Um, and so, you know, having our agent, even though it's a very, very simple agent, but having that agent available on Discord for people to start playing with and getting the community to start doing that and giving us feedback is going to be valuable because, I suspect that we're going to have to add there's various techniques that can be used, and there's a lot of research that's being done on how to get better results from agents. And so there's like reflection that you can do where like the agent kind of comes up with something and then reflects on it and says, okay, how can I improve that? But there's even more sophisticated techniques where we can actually have some prompt optimization, where an agent actually helps us optimize the prompt to receive to achieve a particular result. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and so getting that out there and getting people playing with it and saying, and providing some initial feedback. I mean, one of the things I know right now is that um, it will produce a game specification that will have major holes in it, you know, uh, in terms of like it won't describe like what the card should look like, right? And if it's a complete game specification, even though I told it in the prompt, like, hey, you need to be able to build this thing, it wouldn't know that. Now, um, when we get to Gen AI to then generate the cards, Gen AI may fill in the gaps and just go, well, I'll just, you know, I'll just make
Mm.
cards based on whatever I think, whatever comes to mind. But so we need to do we definitely need to do some work on, even just the design agent to figure out like how to get it to be at the sweet spot of generating something that the rest of the process can do. So I think this is going to give us some valuable feedback. I
Hmm.
think it will also, like I said, we talked about user experience, right? And right now the user experience is going to be more of a traditional software experience where you kind of like say, this is what I want, or maybe more, think of it more like image generation, where it's like, this is the image I want, and it's like, boom, there's your image, right?
Hmm.
And you can ask it for changes, but its response is always going to be an image, and that's more akin to what we're doing than more sort of the conversational mode where it's like you can actually have a discussion with this agent about you know what you want to do. You provide an initial prompt or you provide feedback, and it's always going to produce a specification. Um, so is that the right user experience? Is that gonna, do people want something that's more sort of conversational where you can like ask questions and it can suggest things and whatnot. And then at some point you can go, all right, let's see what that looks like. And then it would produce a specification.
Yeah.
So I think
I
a lot of things that we can discover by getting it out there early. And
I like this part of everything because there's still so many routes it can kind of go with people participating. Um, I I like this almost like it's almost like a game itself, a text-based game where you're like the old school days of just like typing out something and then getting feedback, and it's like almost your own little journey with like creating something that in your head you can put the game together. You're
Mhm,
filling in the gaps that our other AI agents aren't doing yet because we're just starting on those game components. And again, I was just glancing in the Discord at the bot as you were working on it here and there, and whether it worked or not, where at this point because you just launched, like it's the first few attempts. Um, but it's cool to see like where it's going, how it's growing, and what it could be. So yeah, I mean for me that's a big update, and I'm excited about that. And then opening up our Discord it's open right now. I'll have to post our Discord, but soon we'll kind of launch or more, share about it, probably within some circles first. If you find it, you find it, and then maybe we'll have a more wider net in the future of trying to get more people on board once it's a little bit more robust or able to take more people on. But I'm excited to just kind of hit on that today, not have a super long stream. Was there anything else that you wanted to kind of touch on? I mean, I think that's pretty big. Or what's next? What's something to aim for in the next month or so, or the next just like, a couple days even.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, once the Discord bot is up, then it's gonna be, kinda shifting gears back towards, um, the agents and I'm focused right now on the actions agent. So the actions identification agent. Um,
Hmm.
and it's working pretty well, but there's a lot of prompting that I'm having to do of saying, like, okay, you don't need an action for scoring the game because we have a component for scoring the game you don't know about, and
Okay.
and so I'm having to kind of put a lot of stuff in there like don't do actions for this, and now it's producing like a valid set of actions, but I don't think that's going to scale real well. So I think what I'm going to probably do is say not only here's the actions, but here's also a list of components, right? So identify things that are actions, but if there's something that's handled by a component, then you don't need to identify that. That'll be done by something else. So, and I'm still trying to figure out, what exactly the right flow is. I mean, maybe there's some collaboration between the two where it's like here's a set of actions, and then there's another agent like, yeah, but you really don't, like you really don't need this because this can be handled by this. And like I
Hmm.
said, when you're doing AI systems, it's much more about like just experimentation of seeing what works.
Hmm.
It's not like traditional software engineering at all. So were there any questions, Ryan, that
I
anybody out
think
there?
the only question I saw was just and I covered the kind of quick overview of what Chaincraft Games is and what we're doing. Um, yeah, this is just our second episode, and we'll kind of get a better flow. I think maybe in the future I'll try to do an intro and just a quick like recap of who we are, what we're doing at the beginning, at the top of the episode. But these will be great for people to listen in and catch updates on later because it'll be available on Senko TV. I may post it on YouTube as well, maybe on Twitter, but we'll see. Yeah, I think this is a great update. And for anybody interested, find us on our Discord. Just reach out to me on Twitter, Triggedytron, or Buchostan, and I can give you a Discord link. And I usually hang out in the Senko Discord anyway, so you could catch me there. All right, I think that's it for today. Thank y'all for stopping in. Thank y'all for the tips. Thank you, Eric, for everything you're doing. I'm excited to see how this progresses, and we will try to do this stream like I think every 2 weeks. We're going to try to do it for now, and we'll just see how it kind of keeps coming along and growing. So thank y'all for joining us. Till next time, see y'all.
See ya.